So before I had brought in Colleen, Keisha and I were looking at applying to Techstars. And so, as a first-time founder, looking at Techstars, Y Combinator, others, and I happened to be doing some research on Techstars website, and I came across the pre-accelerator, and I was like, "What's that?" I didn't know what it was. So I looked at it, which was essentially the startup weekends. So I was looking at it, and I was like, "Okay, this sounds interesting." Up to that point, had not shared the idea with anybody in the world really yet. It was just kind of this ideation of like, what could it be? How could it work, etc. And so was looking at the website. It was happening in 5 different cities in the next maybe month or so. And interestingly enough, Iowa City was one of the cities that was on there. And everyone's like, well, how and why did you choose Iowa? But it's really tied to the early ideation of what eventually became Tumbleweed. So in 2022, on a road trip, through the US. I was holding on to grief with my grandparents, decided to visit where they came from. They come from northwestern Iowa, northeast Iowa, excuse me. They're from Jessup and Independence. And so I went there. That experience kind of spurred ideation of what eventually Tumbleweed would become. And so then when I was looking at the pre-accelerator programs, and the reason why I chose Iowa was because the idea was born here. And I was like, well, this makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that event, and it required me to jump on a plane the next day. And I did. So the rest is history, and it all kind of worked out. So I didn't really know what to expect, other than you and the team had sent out some kind of pre-planning information, and one of the big things it talked about was when you get there, and I think even someone at the door had told me, go network, get some food, grab a drink, but don't talk about your idea, right? Because we're going to do pitches after the networking session. I was like, okay, so I'm a bit of a rule follower, and so I was like, okay, like I'll keep it under wraps. And I was already at that point very nervous about talking about my idea in the world, afraid someone's going to steal my idea, right? I think that's a pretty common first founder situation. So interestingly enough, most people did not follow those rules. Most people, as we were talking and drinking, were talking about their ideas and they were really excited about it. So I was just listening and asking questions. And there was one other person that was also not sharing any information, and it was Colleen, who happened to be at Startup Weekend as well. And so we go through, we both were, she's sitting on one couch, I'm sitting on another, and we're hearing all these people talk about ideas. Then we get up to do the pitches. Colleen is actually in the person in front of me to pitch. She gets up there and she's pitching, I'm thinking about a celebration of life in a digital space. And what's happening in my head is I was like, I did not just jump on a plane to come to Iowa for some random person to steal my idea, right? Like this is what's happening in my head in her 60-second conversation. So I get up there and I fumble the first 10 or 15 seconds, like, my idea is kind of like hers or something like that. Luckily, from people that were also in the room at the event, were very gracious and said that my pitch, once I got through that kind of, I was shocked, right? Was a little better. So I'm appreciative of that because I had been ideating on it more, right? But in the end, so then we did our pitches, and before we did the voting aspect, I went up to Colleen after everyone was done. I said, "Hey, we kind of have a related idea. Do you want to partner up and see if we're a team that gets chosen?" And so we did, and we ended up partnering up. It was a fantastic experience. We had a couple of folks who talked to us, but no one else who joined our team. It was just the two of us. Death and dying is not something that excites a lot of folks, but we ended up taking home first place that weekend. We brought Colleen as a co-founder, and then 3 months later, June, 3 months later, I made the no, 2 months later, I made the decision to move to Iowa from California, and 3.5 months later, I was in Des Moines. Like one of the first things I learned was as a non-technical founder slash first time founder, I did not know what wireframes and prototypes were, right? So one of the things that I was most anxious about, and Krisha as well, was who and how are we going to build a solution? So one of the things that I learned really quickly, I think it was Saturday, not Friday, but when Colleen and I started digging in, is oh, let's go ahead and just do a clickable prototype. And I'm like, what does that mean? Right. So we're in Figma and we're building amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea we could do this. And so I think that was just the initial, like, oh my gosh, I'm learning so much so fast. And I understand too, like, you actually build a clickable prototype, go out and get user feedback. And we were doing that. Right. So it was really it kind of gave me more confidence and skills in I can take what's all in my head and get it out into a visual aid without spending 20, 30, 50, $200,000 to build a fully robust solution. And then the other side of that was all of the mentors and ecosystem builders that were brought in throughout the weekend. And that's part of what eventually why I made the decision to relocate to Iowa was two main reasons. One was we identified we're an insurance solution. Des Moines is in a huge insurance hub. We at the time, before we got accepted, I made a decision to move out here for the business. And we ended up getting into the Global Insurance Accelerator as well as the ecosystem. What I was finding was every interaction was turning into 3 to 5 additional interactions, right? Opening doors at insurance companies or financial institutions for conversations. And so it really just was um, kind of the warmth and connection of people trying to help early stage startups get connected and succeed. What I like about Startup Weekend over something like building a business plan is one is what I didn't know until later is investors don't care about the business plan. They care about the idea and what you're going to do with it, right? And it is I didn't like the business plan building because I'm like, I like the creative aspect of it. And so I think Startup Weekend really taught me it's you're selling the idea and then you build it in the end. You build it after, right? And so I think it really gave me the confidence and awareness of what works well, whether you're talking to investors or early partners. Yeah, so Colleen and I started in Startup Weekend with probably I think it was 3 to 5 page clickable prototype to start. And then we ended up having our full clickable prototype ready to go out and do some deep user testing. We were doing user testing along the way, but we did a real like as if it was actually real before we built the MVP in the end of 2023, so in December. Then we launched our MVP in February of 2024. Our MVP was great, got great feedback. I will say for me, it was really hard because it was super clunky because we used an out of the box front end, right? Now, it's a great way to do it. We kept our costs really low, our time really low by doing it that way. Um, but for me, as a person who spent most of my careers in large organizations, I felt the clunkiness of it. And so, but we were able to get the feedback we needed, and then we built out, our We Are Beyond beta that went live in October of 2024, which is a fully developed front and back end. It's got our branding, it's got our, Colleen's expertise in UX and UI, and it's a much better interface. So there's that. And then right now, we launched our most recent feature went live in February of 2025, and we're building out additional features that are in the roadmap. You know, I have plenty of things I would love to build, and it's constantly saying, talking to customers and partners about what should we do next, right? So it's now just going down the roadmap and adding in additional support mechanisms for our customers. So I've been a part of Startup Weekend myself, and I've now been a mentor for one virtual and one in person. So I've seen kind of both sides of it, you know. Whether you are going to create an idea in the moment or you're walking in with some sort of idea of what you're thinking, be open to it changing and evolving very significantly. Um, and I think the other piece of it too is you just never know who you're going to meet. So the way you show up in the room, obviously you want to be authentic and you're learning and you're having fun, but don't be rude, don't be disrespectful. You're going to meet people where maybe they could become a co-founder, like Colleen, right? We brought her in. or it's maybe someone who can open a door later on. But I've seen the best and I feel like some of the worst situations where people, they're very tied to their idea. And although they had a team that joined them, they kind of don't let the team help them with the idea or let them challenge the idea and say, hey, like you're a technical founder, but I have experience in, sales and what you're trying to do is gonna be really hard to sell or like whatever it is you're coming together, just be open to learning. And mentors are great. There's investors that come in, but even just in the people who are there for that startup weekend doing the work, um, there's something to bring value, and you never know what could happen in the future. So just come in with as much as you can openness and a willingness to have fun and, work hard. I mean, I think it's startup weekend slash just my own personal experience in a journey as a first time founder is whether you call it gut, whether you call it instinct, whether you call it serendipity, like lean into the moments of you're feeling something. Like me happening to pop onto the pre-accelerator program on Techstars site, then seeing Five Cities come up, then picking Iowa, and I picked Iowa because the idea was born there, right? To jump on a plane to fly out there. You just never know. So I think just if you're feeling the pull, whatever that, however you feel that way, lean in. There's probably something there.